So I've been thinking about this quite a lot. I think it's a revelation at the end, but hear me out. Two founders, a scenario, two founders, same revenue, same market, same growth numbers, but then one goes on to raise 8 million and the other goes to raise 30 million. Most people will say the second founder got lucky or had better connections. I've worked with a number of founding teams and I can tell you that's not the case. The situation in every case. Most times the second founder basically understood something the first didn't. That early stage valuation isn't essentially clear-cut, financial calculation. Fortunately or unfortunately, that's the truth. It is narrative construction. Investors don't form conviction from spreadsheets alone, at least, especially if it's early stage or seed. They form conviction from a theory of where the market is going, and then they look for numbers that confirm, what they have already believed, these convictions, which means the pitch isn't really about your business model. It's about whether the investor has started telling themselves a story about your markets, and that you, the founder, your business, you are the hero of that story. Founders who raised, the biggest rounds, we know don't essentially, have the best company. They are the ones who understand how to engineer belief, essentially why Andela, which is essentially doing outsourcing, would move the narrative around being the future of work. Essentially, real problem, position for it. Think about Flutterwave or Money Point, why they were doing their early rounds. They were definitely not pitching apps. They were selling a version of Africa where friction of cash, or borders completely disappeared. They weren't fighting over spreadsheets. They were painting a map of a new continent, where everything is connected. The number is never just a number. It's a summary of everything your investor thinks is possible, and it's your job as a founder to shape what's possible before they even open the spreadsheet. Essentially, all the work happens before they take a look, at that deck or that spreadsheet, and that's beyond the pitch.